All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and teach well. And peace and blessings to the elect out there that's pushing this word in all truth and sincerity. All right, this lesson is going to go into the history about how Israelites have been scattered, throughout Ireland as well as other countries, around the Mediterranean Sea because, starting off with the first, this is the first, I guess, how do I say it, history part in Ireland, which it's really Scotland, but the Irish, the Scottish, and the Welsh were really all the same people. They just called each other by different names like that because they were in different geographical locations and consisted of different clans or families. But just starting off with this declaration of Arbroath, this first piece of history, which this was in the 1300s, early 1300s, and it was basically like a declaration of, it is like their own declaration of independence and uniting, some nations around them. And as you can see, this is what it reads in this picture. This picture is, the formal documentation. It says, "We know, most holy Father and Lord, and from the chronicles and books of the ancients gather, that among other illustrious nations," which illustrious just means famous or well-known nations, ours to wit, which means like namely, the nation of Scots, have been distinguished by many honors. And honors was like another name for royalty, like high class people, like kings, pretty much. Like if you're to Google honors of Scotland or the Scottish honors, they're gonna define it as the jewelry that has survived since the 15th and 16th century, but they had kings, all dating back to the 1300s. And when I read into this next part, you're going to realize that it was really since 100 AD. They just migrated from, I'm going to keep reading. It says, "which passing from the greater Scythia," and Scythia would be like modern day Turkey, I believe. So Scythia, that's where these people started out. It says through the Mediterranean Sea, and which all the places around it, which consisted of the Roman Empire, and then later I think it was the Persian Empire that kind of replaced it when the Roman Empire fell, and then it kind of later turned into the Western Roman Empire and Eastern Roman Empire, and then they had a schism or a split, and it was the Byzantine Empire. But just to keep going, it says, and Pillars of Hercules, or also known as Gibraltar, which is the part of where modern day Spain and Northwest Africa, almost touch. And that's like a portway into the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. It says, and sojourning in Spain, which then was known as Iberia, another word of, it's kind of like a broken way of saying Heberia, which means the Hebrews' land. So at one point, it was well known that Hebrews lived in Iberia, or which is now modern day Spain and Portugal, because they're, the same island. But that whole landmass was considered Iberia because it's a well-known fact that Hebrews dwelled in that land. And then they were actually known as the Sephardic Jews. All right, I'm throwing all these terms out there so you can look into it yourself. The Sephardic Jews, and then you also had the Moors dwelling among there, and then you can look up, what was it, the Sephardic Sephardic Jews expulsion, which happened in the 1400s, and then because they were forced out of that land. And you can also look up, yeah, that's pretty much it. Or it's Spanish iconoclasm. You'll see that and that's when you had crypto Jews, right? Because they were facing huge, I guess, religious, what's the word? Religious persecution. So they had to, go into hiding, and that's where you get the term crypto Jew, all right? Which were, Israelites, you know. But anyways, it's just to keep reading. It says, among most savage tribes through a long course of time could nowhere be subjugated by any people, however barbarous. So from when, when they started in Scythia and migrated through the Mediterranean Sea, pillars of Gibraltar or pillars of Hercules, and throughout Spain, no tribe could like overthrow their migration. They couldn't overthrow their families. No one subjugated them. And when you look up that word subjugated, it means to bring under subjection. They couldn't be overpowered. So then it goes on to say, and coming thence 1,200 years after the outgoing of the people of Israel. All right, so that was the Israelite, 1,200 years, ago was, from the 1300s was about 100 AD. And that was when the Israelites were pushed out of Judea, all right? About 7 AD, that's when Nero set fire to Rome and blamed it on the Jews or the Christians of that time and started persecuting the Christians of that time, which were Israelites. So to keep reading, it says, they, by many victories and infinite toil, acquired for themselves the possessions in the West, which they now hold. So the Scots, at this time knew their history of where they came from, and through many victories and infinite toil, battles and wars have acquired for themselves possessions in the West, all right, which was, Europe at that time, all the way up until, Scotland, and Spain and so on and so forth. And then, this is also what it says. It says, in their kingdom 113 kings of their own royal stock, no stranger intervening, have reigned. And that comes straight from the scriptures, which shows that they also read the scriptures straight out of Deuteronomy 17 and 14 and 15. It says, when thou art come unto the land which the Lord thy power giveth thee, and shalt possess it, and shalt dwell therein, and shalt say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me. Thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Lord thy power shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. So that's what these people were practicing, these Scottish people, which were Israelites who were just calling themselves, the Scots at this time. That's what they were practicing. Whenever they migrated to a new land and possessed it, they didn't set anyone in rulership over them except somebody from their own bloodline. All right, and so it says, for so long as 100 of us are left alive, we will yield in no least way to English domination, because that's the English were the Edomites at that time. They stemmed from the Roman Edomites. All right, so that's how you know that they had. You can also look up the Jacobite versus Williamite War. You can also look up the Three Kingdoms War, which was the Scottish, the Irish, and the English all fighting amongst themselves. And like I said, the Scottish and the Irish were the same people, but they just, I mean, Esau, Edom's tactic, it's divide and conquer, So English can't, the Edomites came into power, around the 1500s, and also this was kind of the start of it. The 1300s was when the Scots were starting to fight in the battle, and this was like a formal declaration of Scottish and Irish and nations around them coming together against the English. They were taking an oath to, if there was 100 of us still alive, they would yield in no least way to the English domination. And and that spirit still kind of resonates to this day, man, because the Cromwellian conquest, this is still taught over there in the Irish schools. So you had all the way up until there's this time period known as the Troubles, and it was like I think 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a it was a rough time period where that you had rebellious Irish, still resisting the English domination. They were setting off car bombs because they knew that their history. They knew that the English and the Irish, aren't the same people. But going on, just reading on, it says, "We fight not for glory, nor for wealth, nor honor, but only and alone for freedom, which no man surrenders but his life." So there, that's where you get, that part from Braveheart. Robert Wallace, you can look him up too, because he was the one, I believe, that wrote this. And this also inspired the Declaration of Independence in America. That's Patrick Henry. He said, "Give me liberty or give me death." He got it from the Declaration of Arbroath. All right, this is what inspired the American Revolution. Like, what was that, 500 years later or 400 years later? But it says, "We fight not for glory, nor for wealth, nor honor, but only and alone for freedom, which no man surrenders but with his life." So they're, prepared to die, and they weren't motivated by riches or any of that, or even status. They're just like, we just want to be away from these English motherfuckers. But also, these are scriptures that prophesied, the scattering of our people. Deuteronomy 28 and 64, which, I'm sure brothers already know these. But I'm just gonna read through them really quick. This is Deuteronomy 28 and 64. "And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone." All right, because Deuteronomy 20th chapter, from verse 15 on down, talks about the curses that would come upon Israel if they didn't keep the law, statutes, and commandments. They would all these curses would fall on them, and of course, we didn't. So the Lord scattered us, and that's why you have Israelites, calling themselves different names, worshiping false idols, and going out to establish their own righteousness rather than the Most High's righteousness. They don't want to follow the law, statutes, and commandments of the Heavenly Father that's written in the Bible. All right, they're into Islam, they're into Catholicism, they're into Methodist, they're into different philosophies, going about their own ways. But keep reading Ezekiel 20 and 23. "I lifted up mine hand unto them also in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the heathen, and disperse them through the countries, because they had not executed my judgments, but had despised my statutes, and had polluted my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after their fathers' idols." And then Jeremiah 13 and 24, it says, "Therefore will I scatter them as the stubble that passeth away by the wind of the wilderness. This is thy lot, the portion of thy measures from me, saith the Lord, because thou hast forgotten me and trusted in falsehood." So, because of this, Israel was scattered, among other nations, and then, also going into that land of Iberia, which was, which is modern day Spain.